Okay. Hi, Shreyas. So
Hi, Anand.
thank you for
Thank you.
the interview. For this particular kind of things which we are trying to do for CSG, which is basically to tell, to be a voice for the PhDs in India back home, to tell them about how they should prepare themselves for the next phase of life, their post PhDs, and hopefully this will be very enriching experience for me, and hopefully it will be very enriching for other PhDs who will be listening to postdocs like you, who have done very well when you were in your PhDs, and who are trying to achieve something better as you go through your postdoc. Why don't you tell me? Why don't you introduce yourself to the group, and tell me where where were you, before this, and where are you right now to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, thank you very much, Ananda, for having me do this interview. I'm really happy to do it. I feel that CSG is really doing a great job for grad students in India, and indeed, like with the greater outreach, I hope, all around the world. And I'm very happy to do my own little tiny bit for it. So I did my PhD in the physics department at the Indian Institute of Science with Professor Ajay Sood. And I also worked in very close collaboration with Professor Rajesh Ganapati at JNCSR. And now as a postdoc for the last 10 and a half months, I've been working at MIT in the MIT Physics of Living Systems group, as they call it here, in Professor Jeff Gore's lab.
Very nice. Very nice. So let's go down. So how has been your MIT experience so far? Like, so what do you think which is unique about MIT, and what makes it so special?
Well, it's a wonderful experience, and I guess from what I've seen, the thing that struck me first of all is like just the sheer quality of the people around, like the scientific caliber of the people that I'm working with, and at the same time, I would say everyone is there's this great community spirit because everyone is really motivated and everyone really wants to do great science, and they're willing to work with each other and help each other so that all of us can uh, as a community progress forward and make important contributions to science. And this is like, of course, it's MIT, so that it's a global community. We have like great people coming from all sorts of different countries, and also I would say it's people from different backgrounds. I mean, the nice thing about the center that I'm in, the MIT Physics of Living Systems group, is that it's basically a bunch of physicists who are looking at problems in biology, right from the scale of processes within the cell, within a single cell, to how populations interact with each other. So it's across the spectrum. And so
What kind of population?
also, it could be bacterial populations that are trying to kill each other or help each other out by secreting some metabolite, and so on. Or it could just be using like something like Baker's yeast to model some very generic ecological phenomena that might actually be happening out in the savannah. So it's all kinds of sort of ecological problems.
Very nice. So tell me about the department. Like, how old is the department?
So, okay, so the Center for Physics of Living Systems is actually pretty new, I would say. It's a part of the physics department of MIT. So, like my postdoc advisor, Jeff Gore, is someone who played an important role in sort of getting the whole thing together. And then it now has about 8 faculty, but I think 4 of them are experimentalists and 4 are theoretical physicists. Um, and so it's a really nice mix of people who are doing like super resolution microscopy, monitoring transcription within cells, and then the kind of work that I am doing is like basically population dynamics type work with model bacterial systems and so on.
Excellent. So now, let's. So I have the next question here is about Tell me something about your lab. Like, tell me something about your PI. Tell me something about how like what has been your experience so far in the first 10 months into your postdoc.
Yeah, I mean, so it's been an overwhelmingly positive experience, I would say, for a number of reasons. So the PI, so he first of all is someone who majored in. He had four different majors at MIT. He was an undergrad at MIT, and he majored in electrical engineering, physics, economics, and mathematics. And then he went to Berkeley for grad school and did single molecule biophysics. And then came and established, then he was a postdoc at MIT and then established his own lab at MIT. So the thing is that because he has such a diverse set of backgrounds himself, I feel, I mean, when I was applying to various people for postdocs, I could see that, people wanted to hire students from different backgrounds, but it would usually be within some reasonable restrictions. And with Jeff, I feel it's like, I mean, what you did before is not a criterion at all. I mean, the only condition is that you should have been good at whatever it was that you did in your PhD. So we have a mix of people, like there are experimental microbiologists in the lab, there are geneticists, there are applied mathematicians, I'm an experimental physicist. So it's truly an extremely diverse group, which I think makes the lab a really exciting place to be, because you just get to interact with so many different people. You get to listen to so many different perspectives on the same problem, and you can approach the same problem from so many different directions that it's a really truly enriching scientific experience. And there's another thing. So the PI invests a lot of time in hiring people who would sort of gel together in a cohesive way, who would interact with each other, in a really sort of positive way. So that and that's really important to him, because it creates this atmosphere in the lab where you constantly have people talking science to each other and generally being nice to each other. So there's a good camaraderie in the lab, and I think that helps the science as well. In a big way.
So talking about PI, so one of the things which I have learned over the years, and I stress a lot about the mentorship issues in CSG.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like, what if you were to take some of the best aspects of your PI's mentorship abilities? What would have been those?
Well, I guess what he's really good at is striking the balance between how hands-on to be and how much freedom to give to students, because I think that's a very difficult balance to achieve for a PI.
Absolutely.
In general. And so, I mean, the kind of stuff that we have in the lab is that I have regular meetings with him, and at the same time, the meetings are not particularly stressful. Like, the demands are not unreasonable. And there are no restrictions in terms of when I should work in the lab, how much time I should spend in the lab, whether I should come on weekends or not. But at the same time, there is this regular appraisal of what I have done in the previous week or previous 2 weeks or whatever may be the case. And so that automatically keeps you on your toes, right? Because once you know that there's going to be some regular evaluation, even if you're feeling down for 1 day, 2 days, you don't quite feel like working, you automatically pick yourself up because there's this meeting with your advisor coming up.
Right, and that brings me to another question, and that is like, how do a PI reacts to failures?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think at MIT, one of the things that sets it apart is, like, because it's one of the best universities in the world, the expectations are very high. So and the expectations from postdocs are even higher, because postdocs are already supposed to be really independent, and you're not expected to be spoon-fed as a postdoc. And so the idea is that you should have thought of some solution to whatever problem you're facing. Like, you should have thought deeply enough about the problem before you go and talk to your PI. So then the discussion will be about, like, once you've eliminated all the obvious factors, there's a discussion about, what should be done, and like at what point might it be reasonable to stop what you're doing and try something completely different, or there might be some other idea that the PI gives you, or some other lab mate of yours who's involved in the discussion gives you, um, and and so on. So, but I would say that uh, the emphasis is, I mean, all the preliminary ruling out stuff you're expected to do on your own.
Got it.
And so,
Got it. So, tell me something about how are problems chosen in labs like these? Like, what kind of problems are chosen, or how do, like, like, what makes this lab different from thousands of other labs in the world in terms of the kind of questions they are asking?
yeah, I mean, I guess that it's not just in the Gore lab, but also with Professor Ajay Sood and Professor Rajesh Ganpati. The approach that both of these labs, and these are excellent labs that I've been very fortunate to work with these people.
Absolutely.
And I think the thing that they do right is, it's. I mean, what's actually more important than coming up with something to some way of defining a good project is knowing what sort of problems to not go after. And so I think what sets these labs apart from a lot of other labs is not going for incremental research, because the most obvious research to do very often is either like some obvious next step to something that has already been done, or some trivial modification to some technique or some material that somebody has come up with. And once you take these two out of the equation, then you can try to exercise your creativity a little bit more. So the first trap to avoid is doing incremental research. And these labs are both very assiduous about doing that. And then there are things that you can do, like, for instance, because the Gore lab has people with so many diverse backgrounds, or like what I try to do, for instance, is like I have a background in statistical physics, and I try to see how I can apply concepts from statistical physics to ecology and evolution, where that automatically gives you an element of novelty, because people in that field are not really used to thinking in the way statistical physicists do. So, and this happens a lot in my present lab, because people just ask very surprising questions. So there are questions that you, because you have a set background, kind of think of, and then there is a mutually exclusive set of questions that you can't, but somebody else with a different background can lay a finger on those, and then you're like, so this is a really exciting point.
Right. So, Shreyas, because it looks like this is a very multidisciplinary kind of environment in which you are. So, how do you cope up with, because it's probably, it's also very challenging for you to, compete with other lab mates. So, how do you cope up with this kind of environments?
So, I guess one thing is that it's important to realize, like, for instance, when I decided to make a transition from physics to biology, I planned very carefully for it, and I planned long term. So, in fact, I wrote an email to one of Jeff Gore's grad students about 2 years before I applied to Jeff Gore for a faculty position. And I explicitly wrote in that email that I was not going to write to the PI because I was miles away from finishing my PhD. But I wanted, because I was interested in potentially doing a postdoc, and so it would be great if the grad student could help me out, and direct me to some maybe books or papers that I could read, and so that I could develop a background that was more suited to what was going on in the lab. And that helped me a lot when I interviewed, for instance, because I had to speak to every student in the lab for 30 minutes about their work. And the only way I could do that was to actually have some idea about what they were doing already. And so I laid the groundwork for this over a period of 2 years. And I think that's important because, that's the only way basically that you can carry on an intelligent conversation with someone about their research if you're not from that background.
Absolutely. And I think this
So
is the
I think
most
long-term
important.
preparation is necessary for this.
Absolutely, no doubt. And I think this is the most important take-home message from this, from this conversation. I really, really, I really think that the PhDs should take this kind of approach very seriously and execute it when they are looking for postdocs, so that they just don't end up blindly into the labs without doing any background,
Certain.
and
I,
it's
I I would I would say that even if they don't want to change fields, it is useful to take this up.
absolutely, and I think this is also very crucial for undergrads when they are looking for. And I remember from your SciRai article that you did exactly the same thing when you were, trying to figure out which labs you want to
Sure.
join as a PhD, which I think was a great, great strategy. I mean, more than a strategy, I think that's the way, it should.
Yeah.
One should execute these kind of decisions, because these are kind of life, life determining decisions in terms of
Yes, I
career.
agree. Very much so. Yeah, and that's precisely why it's important to think along these lines and sort of think seriously about what you want to do with your life from an earlier stage rather than a later. So it does. I mean, you don't have to do academics. You can do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
But I think this is and actually as a grad student, I think it's an easy trap to fall into because your PhD can become this all-consuming affair which kind of blinds you to everything else that's going to happen in your life later on. Because whatever said and done, your PhD might take 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, but it's going to get over at one point. And at the end of it, that's sort of going to lay the groundwork for what you do for the next 30, 40 years of your life,
Totally.
whether it's academics or whether it's something completely different. And so it's important to view the PhD as a crucial step in your career path and not so much as an end in itself. And that's where I think the long-term preparation sort of comes into the picture,
Absolutely.
regardless of what you want to do after your PhD.
Very nice. Very nice. So let's change the gear now. So I just want to know. So okay, so looks like you are in a very hardcore, experimental, theoretical experimental biology lab, and you must be working very hard. So what do you do after labs? Like what is your life outside the lab and outside MIT, or within MIT outside lab?
Yeah, so I like sports. So I play some table tennis, and there are a couple of guys there who play. So Jeff himself plays ping pong. So
I see.
he's very passionate about a lot of sports.
Oh, okay, awesome.
And he also started this sort of volleyball thing in the summer. So we have a courtyard in front of our building where we would play volleyball once a week, and so that was a nice summer activity. Uh, I haven't been doing too much of it recently, but I have been writing English poetry for a very long time. So for like through the best part of grad school as well, I would say it's something that I enjoyed doing. So writing poetry and then reviewing other people's poetry. There's a website called Writers Cafe where I used to be quite active. So
Very interesting.
yeah, those are some of the, and of course spending time with my wife. She's also doing a postdoc, but then it's always nice to just relax.
Right. How is Boston?
Oh, it's a great place. I think there's lots of things to do, a lot of which I have not done, I would say, because sometimes life can be pretty hectic as a postdoc.
Totally. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think with the kind of PI that I have, the lab that I have, he actually encourages us to do things outside and to go visit places and so on. And I think there are a lot of interesting places to go to in the vicinity of Boston as well. So I went to Provincetown with my wife and went whale watching, so which was an awesome experience.
Tell me something.
There are all these things to do.
Tell me something. If MIT was not in Boston,
Yeah.
how would it feel like? Like would it have been MIT, or like how much important Boston is to create an institution like MIT, like in terms of ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I guess like with the kind of startup culture and the big pharma and everything that you have, I think the fact that you have Harvard and MIT as well is kind of and by Boston, of course, you're including Cambridge and Boston both, right? So I think it's a very tightly knit affair. So I think it's difficult to isolate a place like MIT from, Boston. Uh, just because it's this place with this burgeoning startups and
Right.
and also well-established industries, right? So you have like basically amazing options in academia, in industry, and all the peripheral sort of jobs that are associated with scientific research and patent law, for instance, and
Oh,
things like that. So
interesting. You're talking about patent law. When I was in my 10 months into postdoc, I didn't know anything about patents or IP or startups or tech transfer. And ironically, I'm doing tech transfer now. But it's really good to hear that you are already, which shows not only your awareness level, but it also shows the community awareness in general. Uh,
Well,
so
I mean, I would love to take credit for this, but my wife happened to do sort of short course in patent law when she was in India.
I
So
see. Oh,
yeah,
okay. No,
so
very
and
nice.
I mean, of course,
No,
I think one of the
the
advantages
the
of having
reason
a
the
spouse
reason
in
I said about the
who's also
community is
doing
because
the
I
same.
know that sorry, I know that MIT Tech Transfer is actually the pioneer in tech transfer, and Lita Nelson, who directed MIT Tech Transfer for probably 15, 16 years, she just retired, so she is the
Okay.
one who is credited to create this entrepreneurial ecosystem in Boston. Okay, the reason, the Biogen and all these companies, the Gillettes, the Biogen, which if you look back their history, they all comes from MIT, and the tech transfer of MIT is so that's why I was thinking of
Yeah.
no, so the other thing is so what after PDF? So what after postdoc? What is your thought about?
So I think my experience in an academic environment has been highly positive, and so I feel very strongly about staying in academia. So I would like to get a faculty position, and I mean, I it is my policy to not take anything for granted.
Right.
So I think it's important to work as hard as I can, be as creative as I can, be as independent as I can, so that regardless of where I apply, I should be able to convince people that uh, I'm capable of running a high quality research program on my own, and that's what I'm going to focus on for the next 2 or 3 years. So I have like this HFSP fellowship. So I have my own funding for the next 3 years, and I hope I'll be able to utilize it in a good
Awesome.
way, and
Awesome.
hopefully better. Fingers crossed.
No, no,
Uh,
absolutely. And we will just finish this interview with the last question. So, what are your 2 cents for the current PhDs back home?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to something that I mentioned a while back. I think it's really important to not think of PhD as an end in itself. It is a really crucial step in a professional career. And I think that sometimes students tend to approach a PhD with this naive perspective that I'm doing science, which is a cool thing, and so on. And yes, science is cool, but at the end of the day, this is a profession, and what people need to realize is that if you want to do science in an academic environment for a life, then all PhDs are not going to get absorbed in academia. I mean, the number of faculty positions is very small compared to the number of PhD students who graduate every year. And so you really need to think seriously about like what your unique selling point is going to be if you want to be in academia. And then you have to work towards it. Or so you basically have to understand the rules of the game, right? Whether it's academia, whether it's industry, and so on. And so you really need to start thinking about what you want to do 10 years from now, like at the beginning of your PhD. And so I think it's one thing that's really important is to talk to people during your PhD, talk to seniors, talk to postdocs, talk to faculty who are approachable, and so on and so forth, and collect as much information as you can. Not just about what it takes to get a good faculty position ultimately, but also what other research options are, what other job options are available, and so on and so forth. Because you might not like the academic setting, you might not like the industrial setting, whatever it may be. Your decision should be an informed one, and your hand should at the end of the day not be forced because you did not take into account certain factors. And I think that's, and one final thing I would like to say is that it's important to be ambitious and always aim really high. Sometimes people hesitate, they're not quite sure whether they're up to something or not, whether they can match the caliber of something, match the performance of someone or not. I never once asked myself whether I was good enough to get into MIT or not, because it didn't matter to me. I'm a very process oriented person, so I really believe in doing the right things and then accepting whatever comes my way. And so I don't think anyone should really worry about whether you're good enough or not. But just be really ambitious, aim really high, and try the best that you can with what you have.
Absolutely. That's
So
awesome. Thanks so much, Shreyas. I think this is the main purpose of these series of interviews, because that would, as you said, that people should actually talk to people, talk to
right,
postdocs, talk to colleagues, PIs, the peers, and get to know what
sure,
exactly it will require to reach a particular your ambition. And I think this series, and especially with if we are lucky to get people like you every alternate month, it will be a great, I think it will be this will be one of the ways by which one could actually enrich a very good postdoctoral students here in US or anywhere in the world. In general, the PhDs will also get an exposure at a very early stage in their PhD programs, and it will. And as you said that when I was a PhD, I was not looking at it as if that it was a profession, right? I was
right,
also very amateur, and I think these are, if had I think somebody needed to tell this to me,
right.
and I think this will be a great opportunity for others. Thanks very much. I will close the recording now.